Thanks for tuning in again. This video is about the topic how US sanctions created an edge for Huawei in the automotive industry, and this is relevant if you are invested, for example, in NIO or in Tesla, because I do have the feeling that this might actually shape the automotive industry in China, maybe beyond. And so while this video will be more about the broader context, what has Huawei done and how I think this might impact the industry, I will make actually a follow-up video that is more focused on the topic of what is actually meaning for NIO and how I think NIO will be responding to this. But first of all, let's jump into this topic. So the context here, and I think most of you are aware of this issue, is that, of course, the US has sanctioned Huawei in many regards. I'm not going into the details of that, why exactly and whether or not there is reason to do so, but the matter of fact is that Huawei has been sanctioned. They were not allowed to, for example, sell some of their devices or have been actually shut from foreign markets. And that was basically putting the company into pressure and reacting in order to, still staying a profitable and big company, of course. So what did Huawei do? One of the things, among other things that they have done, is they have launched their own smartphone operating system. So before that, they have been using Google Android, as many have been using before, like other manufacturers, right? But since they have been banned of using that as well, of course, Huawei needed to become self-reliant, self-sufficient, and what they have done is they came up with their own ecosystem for smartphones in the very beginning, and that was just about it. So what does it have to do with automotive? Well, as you can see here in the background, Huawei did not only limit their ambitions to the smartphone, but really started to expand their operating system to other devices and also, of course, to the car and automotive industry. So what you can see here is voice recognition, audio commands in order to access functions within the car. You can see some sort of swipe gestures that you would only be recognizing from smartphones, and among other things, the way how they have found their way with this operating system into car displays. And so, this was a big step that was only possible for Huawei, of course, because they, before that, started to create their operating system in the first place. First of all, for mobile devices, but then expanding here into automotive. And as you can see, this has become a quite advanced operating system for cars. So integrating apps, of course, it's quite responsive, as you can see, and it's very modern. And what I think is the most critical function here actually is that it's really in sync and intertwined with what's happening on the smartphone itself. So it's not only limited to what's happening into the car, but actually also between devices. So you see that here, that you can have cross-functional applications here, and this one is getting mirrored between devices. And basically there are some sort of functions like you're listening music on your smartphone and then you go into your car and it's smoothless without any interruptions starting to play the music into your car. And this is, of course, only possible if you are owning, let's say, the front end here of both devices, and something that is kind of unique right now, I would say, for Huawei in this whole industry. Now, besides creating this operating system, Huawei also thought about how to bring this into the market, and what they've done, of course, they can leverage their brand and their existing store systems, and they're partnering up with a local producer, a Chinese manufacturer, to also start producing cars that are positioned actually against Tesla in the EV market, so battery electric vehicles that, of course, have a little bit of similarity here with Model Y and Model 3. and yeah, basically running the Harmony OS. So that's the name for the operating system here by Huawei for cars. So this is the first product, which essentially is somewhat like a Huawei car, although it really isn't, because Huawei isn't themselves manufacturing it, as the Chinese partners doing it. But this is one way that Huawei found a way into the automotive industry, into this EV sector here in the first place. But these ambitions are not limited to that. Other manufacturers have cooperations with Huawei and are implementing their operating system into their own cars and systems. So there are many cars in the future on the road which are operating on the Huawei Harmony OS. And we can only assume that at least in China this will get traction, but possibly also overseas. And it's going so far that, for example, Chang'an, Bike, and also Geely are not hesitating to take up this external operating system and, let it access some of the functionalities within the car, and basically taking over here the user interface between the user and the actual car. And so it's really a unique approach by Huawei here, which I think could be quite disruptive, the way they're entering the automotive industry, both just offering the software, but at the same time also, in cooperation producing cars for the ITO. We still have to see how well this will be working. As you can see, the ramp has been quite successful, overtaking Volkswagen actually in China in November. I think the latest numbers are also not that great, but the whole market has been down. But 10,000 deliveries per month pretty quickly. Of course, they can utilize their brand, their stores. And, that's the whole thing. Like Huawei has more than 3 billion devices worldwide, and therefore they have huge bargaining power, meaning the users themselves may actually, want this and demand from car manufacturers that they are actually offering Huawei within the car, because otherwise they may choose to not buy and purchase the car. So this is huge bargaining and leverage power. And I'm seeing this from time to time also in my research that I'm doing. For example, here, one of the users who's just, gluing one of his smartphones against the windshield here, just to have a second screen, because the Model 3, of course, is not offering that. But of course, also because some of the software capabilities are not as good localized as a Chinese user wants it. But frankly, I'm hearing the same, for example, in Germany, also in some of the first NIO videos of, car YouTubers or people that I spoke with, or comments that I see by users are saying like, oh yeah, it's a nice operating system by NIO here. However, I would really be able to block my Apple CarPlay, and I'm not able to do so. So both Tesla and NIO must be really cautious here about the future also of their own operating systems, and how they may compete in a world where actually more and more smartphone manufacturers are entering the world of automotive. And I would say Huawei is a good example for that. Of course, Huawei was really forced to do so. I made a LinkedIn post about this topic earlier this week, and finally also somebody who's working at Huawei was writing me a direct message and saying like, funny thing, we just discussed internally that we would have never done or been so actively within the automotive industry if we weren't forced to do so. And this is one of those unintended side effects of sanctions. If you're forcing companies to actually become self-reliant, to not use, let's say, foreign offerings like Google, Android, then they develop their own solutions. And that's frankly resulting in such kind of innovative approaches, I would say. We have got similar things happening right now with the chip industry, where possibly Netherlands and Japan may join the US in banning China from accessing some chip equipment. But once again, and similarly to Pascal Coppens here, I see ways out for China of this, and ultimately I think this may rather fire back on some of the Western companies who were actually benefiting from selling their stuff to China in the past, and then in the future, similarly to this Huawei example, may find a new competitive pressure there, because my bottom line here is that this operating system by Huawei will gain traction, will be adopted by legacy OEM, will be adopted by some of the early EV startups and by Huawei brands themselves, like collaborations that I mentioned before. And really, NIO and Tesla need to think about how they can react to it, or any car maker that is not opening up their operating system to making it accessible and giving somebody who is owning a Huawei phone the benefits that this operating system is clearly showing. And frankly, I see that this operating system is also more advanced than surely what some of the older OEMs have to offer right now, but in some instances even better than, for example, the Xiaopongs, the NIOs, and the Teslas. So that is, in my point of view, this disruptive nature that has happened here with Huawei out of a dire situation there. And I think people need to consider that when analyzing the automotive industry going forward. Also, of course, Apple, we still don't know what will be their next steps with CarPlay and also the Apple Car, but more on all of this and how I think NIO will react to it, namely the NIO phone, in my next video. Thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next one.